Only 2 days into padded practices, the Chargers already have some fireworks with a scuffle breaking out at training camp day 5, and it's good because we're finally seeing this team show a little bit of fight.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer. We've been covering the Chargers now for 8 seasons, and this is our 6th season as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Me and David just celebrated our 5th year as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you guys and the everydayers for being back here with us today and always making us your first listen. But to make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got?
Day 5 of training camp and the second consecutive day of the boys in pads, and things got a little bit chippy at today's practice, and honestly, I love it. Then we have Justin Herbert showing up on the top 100 players. I think you'll be pretty happy with where he's at. And Alohi Gilman continuing to show why he deserves your support as one of the main safeties on this roster.
We had to feel pretty good about him but what is behind him is a much bigger question mark. But today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. David, we saw some fireworks. There were some questions in the press conference where you could tell the beat reporters were kind of asking about a little fight that may have happened at Chargers training camp day 5. And lo and behold, Daniel Popper breaks the scoop out on his piece for The Athletic, which you guys should be subscribed to if you haven't already. And the two main culprits were Kenneth Murray and Gerald Everett. And David, I tried to tell people if you want to, try to tackle Gerald Everett, it's going to be a fist fight, right? And I think we saw a little bit of that, but it's something that's not common with this team. With Brandon Staley, even before Brandon Staley, there haven't been a ton of these kind of fights breaking out. But this is what happened according to Daniel Popper during the practice. It says, Murray and Everett wrestled each other to the ground after the play and had to be separated by teammates and coaches. And David, maybe some people think, hey, get it in line type of thing. But for us, I feel like we kind of love it.
This is football, man. This is exactly what I wanted. And honestly, I think for the Chargers that have had an identity lately, the last couple of seasons, is a little bit of a soft football team. I think this is something that I actually like to see. I think this is something that's going to start to change that message a little bit, start to change that vibe around the team is like, hey, we need to get more physical and we need to ratchet up the intensity. These are the type of moments that are sometimes going to happen as a byproduct of that intensity getting ratcheted up, but I'm all for it.
This is what Derek Ansley, the new defensive coordinator, had to say about it. That's just competitive football. But you always want to make sure that you keep a professional brand intact and move on to the next point. And he's right. There's a fine line. You don't want, this distracting or taking away from the practice. No. But let's be honest. If you're going to kind of change yourself from being a team that gets pushed around to a team that has a little bit more of a physical edge to it, this is what it's going to look like. And I love that we're seeing it, right? And I wonder who was getting under whose skin. I wonder who initiated it, right? The only downfall of not being actually out of practice.
These are two really physical football players too, Daniel. We know Gerald Everett, he loves to initiate contact. He likes to force you to bring him to the ground. He wants, like you said, he wants to make it a fight. He wants
the funny thing is it wasn't even a throw to Gerald Everett. It was a throw to Keenan Allen, and somewhere on the side, Gerald Everett and Kenneth Murray are having their scuffle, right? So, but you're right. But, David, it's also just nice to see Kenneth Murray kind of playing with an edge, right? There's a fine line. Ask Joey Bosa. You know what I mean? But, you want guys playing with an edge. You want them to kind of be a little bit chippy and get in guys' faces and act like they care about this. You can tell these dudes, the guys out here, they all very much care about what's going on, even when the play is not to them.
No, absolutely. I think that's one of the common themes for Kenneth Murray is that there's been a lot of people that have been bringing his name up unprompted. The question has nothing to do with him, but he's definitely someone that they wanting to bring up, like Sebastian Joseph Day. He said also K9. K9's done a wonderful job. They've both done a wonderful job this camp. K9 has really stepped up big time. It's been a really productive camp so far. There's still some room to improve. Getting rugged, I love it. And he said that with a little bit of a kind of a cheeky smile there.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, Sebastian Joseph Day, just one of a line of players that has had some very, glowing comments about Kenneth Murray so far this training camp.
Well, and I think an important part of that you didn't mention is just the fact that Sebastian Joseph Day was asked about Eric Kendricks, right? It had nothing to do with Kenneth Murray when he was asked the question. It's like, hey, how much of an impact is Eric Kendricks making? He's like, well, actually, shout out to Kenneth Murray because he's a guy that's actually been doing very well too. And like the thing is he wasn't, denigrating, or downgrading what Eric Kendricks has been able to do. But it's like, hey, this dude has earned a shout out as well. And everyone's talking about the improvement coming just from Eric Kendricks. These players are getting, going out of their way to tell you, hey, Kenneth Murray is there too. And it's like you have to fight the urge, just like Chargers players are fighting in practice, to jump in on the Kenneth Murray
to buy in on the bandwagon.
Hype, man. We talked about it before. I mean, he's been a breakout player for us in years past, but it's nice hearing it from different people. And this is the reason it means a little bit something different from Sebastian Joseph Day to me, because this is what he said in the next part of his quote, where in the second separate Eric Kendricks question, he once again brought up Kenneth Murray and said this: I can tell about the growth because I was here last year with K9. I can tell how much he's growing. He's growing a lot, so I'm happy for him too. So like, he has got to see it, right? Like he came in, he's only had one full year of Kenneth Murray experience, and even he can tell from year 1 to year 2 with Sebastian Joseph Day playing with him, he can see a big improvement. And it's getting harder and harder, David, not to think we could see a big improvement from Kenneth Murray.
I want to see it. That's the thing is, like, I want to be a believer. Dan wants to be a believer, but we have to see it on a consistent week-to-week basis before we can buy all the way in. I mean, Kenneth Murray has been a player that has been chock full of potential and has all the athletic ability that you could ever ask for. It's about putting that together and turning that into production on the football field. And that's what we need to see. But it is nice to hear it from multiple different people confirming the same thing, that Kenneth Murray is locked in and he is ready to go this season.
And like we heard from Eric Kendricks, sometimes it doesn't click until year 3 or 4 or 5, right? And we saw that with Kazir Wright. We saw it with Drew Tranquil. So like, there is a chance, there is a precedent for it, but it just, this is a guy we've been hyped about for a long time. Hasn't been able to put it together, but according to all reports, he's playing well. The run defense is playing well. A lot of things we're not used to. So I do want to talk about Gerald Everett a little bit too, just because he hasn't been the topic of many training camp discussions. And I think he kind of falls in the weird spot of between, he's not fighting for snaps, and he's not really fighting for a roster spot. And those guys kind of get left behind because it's just Gerald Everett out there doing Gerald Everett things. Both of the days I've been out there, David, he's looked great. I mean, I'm excited to see him in Kellen Moore's offense. But I wouldn't say it's a down training camp for Gerald Everett at all. I think he's playing good.
Yeah, no, I think Gerald Everett is doing everything that everyone is asking him to do, and I feel like he is in for a big year because they're going to be throwing it deep a lot, and someone's going to have to eat underneath. And that guy, at least one of those guys, is definitely going to be Gerald Everett.
And it seems so far when they want to kind of go vertical, they go to Donald Barham. When they want to kind of go underneath and get someone that can get some yards after the catch, they go to Gerald Everett. So trying to use those guys in kind of the facets of their game that they work best in.
Makes a lot of sense.
That's all you can ask for. I mean, that's what you always want. Tailor the offense around your players.
Exactly.
But Gerald Everett might get I don't know. There's so many weapons here. But he's definitely going to dominate the target share at tight end this year. And it's, with what Kellen Moore's done with Dalton Schultz and guys in the past, Peyton Hendershot and Jake Ferguson, whoever it's been, he's always seemed to get a lot out of those tight ends. Excited to see what he can do with Gerald Everett because we know Gerald Everett has a lot of tools to work with and does some things much better, at least in the receiving game, than you see a lot of other tight ends from around the league. But he's going to be Justin Herbert and one of his favorite targets again this season. And the league has spoken. The NFL players have voted, and they know where Justin Herbert is going to rank in the NFL's top 100 players. Might not be as high as Chargers fans want, but I think it's a pretty good ranking. So we're going to talk about him being high up on that list and kind of getting the respect around the league, even after a down season in production, and him going out and showing it at Chargers training camp day 5, where he went reportedly 6 out of 6 in the third down drills they were doing. So we're going to get into that coming up right after this. First, I need to tell you guys about FanDuel, and right now you guys need to go take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first amount in bonus bets back up to $200. That's right, just $20 and you'll land $200 back in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can be spending on anything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. And right now, baseball's fun. especially with the trade deadline. I so much wish that we saw an NFL trade deadline that looked anything like what you see in the MLB. Obviously, there's no prospect or farm systems or anything, but like the hot stove is crazy. It's an insane time to be watching baseball. It's an even better time to be betting on baseball. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, well, if you give us an opportunity to talk about Justin Herbert, we absolutely will, because he's the highest paid player in NFL history right now. And that's just for today's show. Thank you to the everydayers, of course, as always, for being here. And we'll be back with you guys recapping every Chargers training camp practice, including Sunday's scrimmage. We'll do a live show after that. But we got another practice today, and then we'll see a break, and we'll get into some fan mail this Friday to get to your guys' questions, because we haven't in a while. But the NFL's top 100, David, seems to be one of the things in the offseason that people take a lot of credence, or, I think lend a lot of authority to, because it's a list made by NFL players themselves, right? So it's like you're not yelling at media people or anonymous GMs and executives and things like that. This is where the players rank these guys, and Justin Herbert on the latest list comes in as the 32nd ranked quarterback, 32nd ranked player in the entire NFL in the top 100. And this is the highest we've ever seen from him. He was 40 after the 2021 season, and after the 2022 season, he comes in at 32.
Justin Herbert at 32, and this is kind of one of the things they had to say, is that Herbert has torched defenses as well as his heralded contemporaries. He now has the most passing yards and second most touchdowns in his first 3 seasons. He has the gaudy numbers, the incredible toughness. Now it's time to pair that with the playoff success. And I mean, I understand it. I mean, you look at the record books, Justin Herbert's name is all over the record books. So the individual accomplishments, they're definitely there. I mean, Justin Herbert has lit up the league since he has, been able to don the lightning bolts. But the playoff success is one of those things that unfortunately has not accompanied him. But the players who got to speak about Justin Herbert definitely said some very glowing things about him.
They did, and it is cool to kind of hear how, players who have gone up against Justin Herbert think about him, because those game plans are not fun going into the week. They have to play this dude because he just is kind of so unnatural in how he plays the game and just does things that nobody that size should be able to do. And you heard that echoed in their sentiments. But it's crazy to me that he moves up 8 spots after his worst statistical season, because that's what a lot of things that people care about. He did make the playoffs, so that's a feather in his hat, but still has 0 playoff wins. And to me, David, it just seems like, where is he on this list if he has any kind of playoff success? Right? It feels like the players on this list are, itching to shoot Justin Herbert into the stratosphere of this list. Like, if he goes and wins the Super Bowl, he's top 5 or 10 on this list next year. Like, let's be honest, right?
Period.
It's the only thing that's missing in his resume. And God bless him if he wins 1 or 2 playoff games this year. I mean, we're talking about a top 10 player in the NFL, and being 32nd out of the top 100 players in the NFL, I mean, that's just insane, right? There's only 32 teams. There's 32 teams in the league. Yeah. This dude is the 32nd best player, and that's, taking into account the best player at every position in the NFL, which is crazy. But I do think, when you hear people, they talk about him kind of the way we think about him.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Kayvon Thibodeau was, very, very forthright. He just says, as long as you have Justin Herbert, you have a chance. Like that, you're going to be able to win a football game. Myles Garrett he's like, hey, I should not be looking at any quarterback in the eye face to face. He said it's unbelievable how big Justin Herbert actually is.
Yeah, and he said you think he's going to be like 6'3", 6'4", and then you get on the field with him, and he's like one of those guys that's lying about. And he's actually taller than he says. He's more like 6'6", 6'6 and a half, which is just insane. Yeah.
I mean, Justin Herbert's a monster, and I think everybody around the league, they recognize it. I mean, they see the amazing things that he's able to do. I mean, all of them marveled at his throw against the Giants, where he was able to throw it 65 yards in the air, basically on a run. I mean, we've all seen that clip. It's just one of those mesmerizing plays of the last several years in the NFL.
Yeah, and I thought it was very interesting hearing what Joey's brother Nick had to say. Nick Bosa saying, I think he's probably the most talented quarterback in the league. I mean, Kayvon Thibodeau, obviously one of his teammates at Oregon. You have Nick Bosa, who obviously has Joey Bosa as a brother, so you better say something nice. But said he rolls out to the left or right, and then just turns and chucks it across the field, which is usually a no-no, but when you're Justin Herbert, it works out. And then you have someone like Geno Smith, who just had his renaissance season, saying he's got all the tools, he can run, he can pass, he's smart. I mean, you watch some of the throws he makes, and they're just silly. Like, that is, even by NFL standards, he's doing some things that are jaw-dropping. And I mean, a lot of great quarterbacks played before him, but there's still things it feels like you're seeing the first time when Justin Herbert does them. But let's talk about what he did at practice on Tuesday, Chargers training camp, day 5. He showed why he's the highest paid player in the NFL, especially in the 7-on-7 periods. The Chargers were doing a focus on third downs, and all he did was convert a bunch of third downs.
Yeah, I mean, Justin Herbert was straight money. According to Eric Smith, he found Mike Williams on a couple of plays back-to-back and converted third downs. You know, one of them was a 3rd and 3, the other one was a 3rd and 6. And then, you know, he was able to make several long plays down the football field, plays to Quentin Johnston and to John Hightower that, according to him, would have been 30-plus yard gains. So, I mean, Justin Herbert just laser focused, locked in. And I mean, just like we've seen throughout his early career on those money downs, on those gotta have it type of situations, more often than not, Justin Herbert is coming in the clutch most of those times.
Yeah, unfortunately, we've had to see him in way too many of those situations just because as a team, the Chargers haven't been able to keep him out of enough of those, you know, super close games. So he has so much invaluable experience there. But Eric Smith said he went 6 for 6 on the third down plays, so you can't do any better than that. Obviously, I think the other thing that of note here is just still continuing to push the ball downfield. A lot easier, right? You put a grain of salt with it because this is 7-on-7, so there's no pass rush, right? But it doesn't mean the defensive backs are trying any less hard. The linebackers are trying any less hard to cover. But ended the third down period with 3 straight completions of 20-plus yards, and then the 2 of them that were 30-plus yards. Also, John Hightower just continues to be a menace.
He's been going crazy, man.
According to Daniel Popper, 3 touchdowns yesterday when they were doing red zone drills. Obviously, gets into 30-plus yard today. Gain from Justin Herbert today. I mean, it's hard to have a better camp for someone that's trying desperately to fight for a roster spot than what John Hightower has been able to do.
A spot we didn't even know it was going to be available. We didn't even.
And we're still not, right?
Right, and hey, if Jalen Guyton comes back next week and he's healthy, he still probably has the inside track on that 6th wide receiver position. Sure. But all that John Hightower can do is to keep making these big plays, stacking these big plays day after day after day. He wants to make this decision as difficult as possible for the Chargers organization to make. And to his credit, his name is popping up on these recaps pretty much every single day. So kudos to John Hightower for making the plays.
Both days I've been out there, he's made a big play. I mean, the very first day he caught a 50-yard touchdown from Justin Herbert. And, I mean, if you were him fighting for the spot he's fighting for, you have to make yourself undeniable. You have to make it so they cannot cut you. And I think a kind of same in the Gerald Everett mold is just Mike Williams having a quietly, you know, great camp so far. Another guy we don't talk about because we know what his role is. We know he's, you know, wide receiver 1A, 1B with Keenan Allen, and Keenan Allen's been great also. But Mike Williams in particular, another guy who's had an outstanding camp, and maybe we don't just talk about him enough just because, you know, we expect him to be good. We know when he's healthy what he's capable of, but that's continued.
Well, and also I think they're just really excited about wanting to find out different ways to use
him
Mike
in the slot and all that, like we've talked about.
Exactly. I mean, I like the fact that they're trying to find more mismatches for Mike Williams because he is a very dynamic wide receiver, and I think a guy that has gotten better and has found different ways to really implement his game and not be as much of a, you know, a boom or bust type of guy, and be a guy that can provide some more consistent production. You know, some of those plays that are on more of those shorter type of plays that he's able to allow his athleticism to get some yards after catch. I mean, he's done pretty well in those type of situations. So to see Mike Williams to continue to grow, continue to get even better, even after the big contract, is definitely good to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many, you know, after the catch situations I want to see him, and that's how we saw him break his back last season. You know, they tried to do that one time in week 18, and it came back and fired. I don't need him taking unnecessary hits, but still, yeah, I mean, he's been great so far, and I think we saw in 2021 when he is the focal point of your offense, he can produce like a number 1 receiver, you know, almost 1,200 yards that year, 9 touchdowns. He can be that guy. Health is the main thing, though. But there's more we want to get to from this practice, including Alohi Gilman making the play of the day, and it seems like he's running away with the safety job next to Derwin James. And the best thing you can hope is that he makes the most out of it and he's out there making plays. And we saw a little bit of those instincts and playmaking ability making the play of the day at Tuesday's practice. And we're going to get into that coming up right after this. We've talked a lot about, the safety position, specifically talking about kind of the end of that position group where there's going to be a fourth safety that role is probably up for grabs still with guys like Raheem Lane, Mark Webb, and other guys trying to kind of go after that spot. But
Yeah.
who we haven't talked about as much so far, at least, is Alohi Gilman, who made the play of the day at practice because the offense was absolutely rolling. The offense, like we talked about,
Yeah.
third downs, Justin Herbert's out there. He goes 6 for 6. He comes back out on the 11-on-11 period with defense and an offensive lineman all out there, basically as close to a scrimmage type of situation as you can get. Offense marches down the field, gets into the red zone, quickly, but then Alohi Gilman kind of breaks up the good feelings on offense. He picks off Justin Herbert, who was trying to get it to Donald Parham. Kenneth Murray, I think, underrated, kind of did a good job having Donald Parham tangled up, being physical with him, not letting him break up the throw. But Alohi Gilman makes kind of one of his first statement plays, probably the biggest play he's made at training camp so far. And we've seen a couple of him kind of breaking on plays, having good instincts, and kind of making himself felt on that back end.
Yeah, I mean, I think, for us, I think maybe we've been talking about Alohi Gilman's spot like it was more up for grabs than it actually is. I mean, for Alohi Gilman, all he's done since training camp to start has been consistent. He's been around the football. He's made some plays, and he made another big play here against a guy who has literally an almost a whole foot on him as far as trying to defend him, which is very, very difficult. So the fact that he's able to make this type of play, I mean, he's just solidifying himself as that next safety, after Derwin James. And so you got to, give it up to him. I got to put a little more respect on Alohi Gilman's name.
Yeah, at least on his playmaking ability, right? I mean, we saw it against Cleveland in that game, intercepting Jacoby Brissett, kind of sealing that game for the Chargers.
Yeah.
I mean, they still almost found a way to lose it, but that should have been kind of what won the game right there. And he also, according to Eric Smith, who's where those first notes came from, had another play later on where he broke up a deep ball in combination with Derwin James to John Hightower, the only people that could stop John Hightower so far at Chargers training camp. But we did see earlier in training camp, he had a great play with Justin Herbert trying to find Gerald Everett along the sideline, made a good play to break on it, found a way to get his hand on the ball and make plays like that. Like, I don't think you want Alohi Gilman trying to go one-on-one with the other team's best receiver or anything like that or in those situations. But what he is showing is that his, kind of understanding of Brandon Staley's defense and the zone coverages that they're playing on the back end, that he's getting a little bit better at taking his chances and making some plays on the football. And I think you love to see it. And I think you love to see the Chargers defense making some plays in the red zone because that's not something we've seen very often. And I think the other thing is, too, is just like, I mean, we talked about it when we talked about the biggest training camp battles. We said, hey, JT Woods would have to kind of look otherworldly in comparison to how he looked before or how he looked last year if he's going to make up the gap between him and Alohi Gilman, because JT Woods had no trust from the coaching staff seemingly coming into this year's offseason, right? Whereas Alohi Gilman got the trust of this staff last year when he started games down the stretch of the season, started a lot of games during the Chargers' 4-game winning streak, and he's a guy that, like, it's going to be him at this point. So it's great to see him making some plays. Where on the other side, David, with JT Woods, it's been kind of quiet, right? We knew we weren't going to be able to really evaluate it until the pads came on, and now the pads have only been on for a couple days, but it's still been a quiet camp so far for JT Woods.
Yeah, which, I mean, it's not what you want. I mean, that's definitely for me. I was hoping to see JT Woods pop a little bit when those pads came out. I wanted to see the progression. I wanted to see, the development in his game from last year to this year. And up to this point, he hasn't made any kind of those splash plays or hasn't stood out at all. And I mean, we're only sitting here 2 days in with pads, so obviously there's still a lot of time to go.
But even without pads, like, it's not the way we're seeing, like, oh, hey, JT Woods has, had 3 pass breakups, like Dean Leonard,
right.
Or anything like that. I mean, there's still lots of one-on-ones. There's still opportunities for him to go out there and be making plays on the football, other than just obviously what he needs to get better at, which is tackling.
Right, and the range hasn't really showed up. The ball skills hasn't showed up. None of those plays have popped up on any of these recaps. So for JT Woods, it definitely has been a quiet start to his training camp.
And for JT Woods, the biggest thing is going to be preseason when there's
Definitely,
nobody blowing
yes.
the whistle for you to stop tackling somebody,
Right.
right? Like Derek Ansley talked about, hey, that you can get pretty close to tackling someone right now. You can still
Right.
be in the right position. You can still bend your knees and drive through someone and do all of those things. And you're getting to see that from JT Woods so far. I mean, when I saw him, I was hoping he would look a lot bigger, right? Because he just looked so wiry as a rookie last year. And guys have different, body styles and stuff like that. I thought maybe he looked a little bit bigger in person when I saw him, but not like a huge difference.
Yeah.
Obviously. And he's a taller defensive back, so it probably wouldn't show as much anyways. But this is going to be a guy where we have to see it in the preseason. Once you'd have to think he's going to get a ton of run during this Chargers 3 preseason games. Like, that is ultimately where we're going to, have some time to kind of feel better about JT Woods. And even then, it's going to be him going up against, lesser guys.
Yeah, but I feel like that's where he's going to have to move the needle at, though. I mean, especially after the performances in the preseason last year, which is really like his main exposure to the NFL game, even though he's going up against a lot of guys that weren't going to make an NFL roster. He didn't really get to see the field at all in the regular season. So this is going to be another situation to where he's going to be able to have an opportunity to show that he got better at the things that he was not very good at. And obviously that is tackling and getting your guy on the ground. We know the ball skills are there, but we need to see that all get put together in the preseason. So, yeah, he's going to be one of those guys that you kind of have to see him play. And you have to keep a very close eye on and see if he's made those necessary adjustments.
Yeah, and Daniel Popper noted in one of his, points about Justin Herbert in his piece that came out on Tuesday and just said, JT Woods on one of the plays had a good chance to go make a play on a football and just, read it late and didn't get there. Could have been an interception potentially. So, like, even when you can't see the tackling, those are the kind of plays I think you were hoping,
Yes, exactly.
At the same time, I mean, if you listen to what Derek Ansley says about him, feels like they're, impressed with him, or at least, not thinking he's come up short so far during training camp. They said he's doing a really good job of trying to do that, what we ask him to do it. And so, I mean, he said they're saying the right things for JT Woods. They're also saying, it's not just JT Woods who needs help tackling. It's the entire defense
Which
that
is
needs
true.
help tackling. Yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing too. Like, we'll talk about that on shows coming up too, is just, so far the run defense has looked pretty good according to all reports. When I was out there, it was fine, but they were only in helmets. So it's like there was nothing you could really take away at that point.
Right.
It's going to be interesting to see kind of how that works. And then you're always trying to balance, like, okay, well, is it Kellen Moore's run offense that's struggling early on? Or is it the Chargers run defense, who has been terrible, looking a lot better? So it's going to be interesting. But with JT Woods, I mean, I think, it's probably not a race with him and Alohi Gilman, but at the same time, he's going to be on the field. So, like, we just want to feel some kind of confidence that the next guy on the field, with Derwin James' injury history, with the amount of times Chargers will put 6 defensive backs on the field, that you can trust this guy. And so far, we're still waiting for that, but there's still a lot of time.
Jury's
left,
still out. Yeah.
Absolutely. There's another day tomorrow. We're going to get, the third padded practice for the Chargers, and we'll be back with you guys tomorrow to recap that. But to make sure you guys don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, and also listen wherever you get your podcast from. You don't have to do one or the other. You can do both. If you watch on YouTube, go subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast from for, slips like that. But you can also find the show every day on all of our social media. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Talk Sports and David Drogemeyer on X at DroTalkSD. You can also find the show's page at Locked On LAC. We're also on Instagram. That has the same name, at Locked On Chargers. And you can find us on our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. We will be doing fan mail this Friday. If you guys want to get your voicemails in, you can send a 30-second voicemail to 323-524-7924. We're always going to be here every day of the offseason bringing the content, the only daily Chargers podcast around. So thank you guys again, as always, for making us your first listen. We really appreciate your support. 5 years in. Don't plan on stopping anytime soon, so we hope you guys are along for the ride. But that's going to do it for today's show. We'll be back with you guys tomorrow breaking down training camp day 6. Until then, take it easy and go Bolts.